Welcome to the Word Witch podcast. I'm your host, Domenica, author coach and founder of Word Witch. This show is for spiritual teachers, healers, witches, and mystics who feel called to write a book. Not just any book, but the one that carries their message and reaches the souls who need it most. Here we talk about how to apply your spiritual tools to the writing process so that you can position yourself as the authority in your niche, expand your reach, heal through your own words, and create a passive income stream that supports your sacred work. Let's make some magic and publish the book only you can write. Are you a spiritual teacher or healer? Have you been saying to yourself, one day I'll write my book, but that day never seems to come? Well, I want to invite you to the Chapter 1 Challenge, a free 3-day live experience happening July 25th through the 27th, where spiritual writers like you finally get crystal clarity on your book idea and actually start writing it. You'll get crystal clarity on your book's topic and purpose, understand exactly who you're writing for, and walk away with a clear, soul-aligned path to finishing your book. Plus, you'll be finished your very first chapter. You don't need to be ready. You just need to answer the call. This is your sacred nudge to stop thinking about writing your book and actually begin. So to join me, go to wordwitchcc.com/CH1C to save your seat for free today. Again, that's wordwitch, C for copy, C for consulting.com/CH for chapter, 1, C for challenge. I can't wait to help you write the first words of the book that could heal the world and yourself. I'll see you there. You're listening to the Word Witch podcast. On this episode, I'm speaking with Gareth Pickering. Gareth is a personal growth advocate, co-founder of Fathers, Sons, Brothers, host of the critically acclaimed Father, Sons, Brothers podcast, and Gareth guides men to lead and love authentically. In this episode, we talk about relationships and how they can be a vehicle for transformation, and also how stories and words create our realities. And we dive into a little bit of how men can show up in their relationships to support their significant others. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of the Word Witch podcast. I'm here with Gareth. Hi, Gareth. How are you?
Very good. Domenica, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Of course, I'm so excited to have you here to talk to the men who listen into the podcast. So thank you so much for coming on and being part of the Word Witch community.
Good to be here. I was really excited to see the topics that you were speaking about when we connected in that Facebook group. And I'm excited to share, both with your male and female audience, the work that I'm doing. And excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. So why don't you introduce yourself to my audience, tell them who you are, what you do, and who you serve.
So my name's Gareth. I am originally from South Africa. I'm actually in South Africa at the moment, although I live full-time in Guatemala right now. In 2014, had a sort of quarter-life crisis of sorts and went on a sort of eat, pray, love adventure to go and see if I could find myself. And on the way, I discovered multiple different modalities. I went to around 45 different countries, and to cut a really long 10-year story short, it was really just an adventure and a journey of coming back to love and accept myself fully. Multiple different healing modalities, including meditation, understanding intention setting, tapping into some of the Hermetic principles and some of the subtle laws of the universe, which up until that point in the world that I'd lived in, I was completely disconnected from. Anything that had the word spiritual in the title was just not something I was even going to explore. And I could see now how that kept me stuck. Like I didn't spend any time taking a look at how frequency had anything to do with my reality and with a couple of experiments and a chance encounter with a book called The Secret, it opened up an entire world to me, which actually woke me up to be like, what is actually going on that I haven't been paying attention to? And so I spent the last decade taking a look at some of those and understanding those sort of principles of reality hacking and how our words shape our reality. And so we can chat a little bit about that. And then more recently, on a journey for me to realign my own core wound, which I identify as being the fear of rejection, and how that played out in my life was in sex addiction. I was like continually looping in intimate connections and seeking out intimate partners, but often in the shadows with a lot of guilt and shame. And I held this to myself and I didn't want people to know about it. But yeah, I then came across men's work, and it sort of came into my world without me going to seek it. It was part of a different retreat that I was on, and I stepped into a men's circle that I probably wouldn't have gone into had I not been part of this multi-day retreat. And a men's circle was on one of the days. And I stepped into the circle, and for the first time in my life, I spoke openly to a group of men who I didn't know about the very thing that I'd kept secret for most of my life, which was sex addiction. And as the words came out of my mouth, I was petrified. I was like, this is the very thing that I've never wanted to ever speak about. And I looked around that circle and I didn't quite know what to expect. But what came back to me was just love, compassion, complete acceptance, like this honor. And I was like, whoa, this is strong. And I stepped out of the circle having shared this. And I felt like I left something really significant, so a heavy load that I'd been carrying my entire life in that circle, and it got transmuted there. And when I stepped back, I was like, wow, that was pretty powerful. And if that wasn't enough, just feeling how much had shifted for me just by speaking about the very thing that I had chosen not to speak about, in the days that followed, other men came up to me that were part of that circle and they said, wow, thank you so much for sharing. I've had a similar theme, and it had been so healing for them as well. And it just blew my mind because I was like, oh, wow, I could suddenly see that this technology, I call it now I call it a technology of a sacred men's space to be able to chat about some of the challenges that I face as a man with men who are in the same space to come together for a shared purpose had been so powerful for me. But it had also helped everybody else. And then when other men had shared their stories, there were pieces of their stories that resonated with me. I just had this like real sense that I was like, oh, wow, this could be something that could really heal the world, because a lot of what I see as challenges in the world, I describe as, immature masculinity, where men out there are stuck in competition, fighting with one another, disconnected from their emotions and not speaking about it. The me of 15 years ago. And yeah, so in that moment, I just had this realization that, okay, this is going to be my mission to serve. And so, yeah, I find myself living in Guatemala. I serve men. I specifically am interested in the idea of reality creation, how we can use scripts and words and plans for our lives, which is seemingly something quite important that we would do if we were going to build a house, but not a lot of people do that for their lives. So I'm interested in that. And then the lens of men's work, specifically through the role of relationship and how relationships can be used to also be a vehicle for transformation. And so, yeah, I've got a podcast called the Fathers, Sons, Brothers podcast, and I work with men in relationships and leadership.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. It's such important work. Yeah, I think, as a woman, I kind of look at men as like having not the support that we do as women. We tend to come together more in community and to express ourselves um, more fully and more openly. And I don't think men have that same privilege. And it's kind of sad. And so I am grateful for the work that you're doing, bringing men together and helping them realize that they are emotional, they are fully human, they feel all the things, and it's allowed for them
Mm-hmm.
to do that.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, it's so funny that you said, I was laughing a little bit that you came into this work through The Secret. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's very common in our kind of line of work. And that's how sort of how I found my way into this as well. Um, we were talking before that I I started out around, 18, 19 years old and practicing witchcraft. And that's where I kind of started my awakening journey. And all of that kind of happened after I had watched the Secret documentary. And it was actually in cosmetology school. My school's like leader, president, sorry, the school's president, she was really into like manifestation work and like she was really into it. So we were made to watch this documentary, and I remember watching it and hearing what they were saying and being like, holy shit, I remember being a kid doing these things, like imagining the thing that you wanted, whether it was a toy or a bike or, anything like that, and
Hmm.
being like, man, that would be really cool if I came home and had a toy sitting on my bed. And more often than not, I would come home from school and there would be a toy sitting on my bed. And so it was kind of a remembering, that
Mm.
playful, childlike remembering that you create from this place of, oh, what's the word? Like, of sheer non-resistance. Children do not resist. They just think everything can happen, like there's no impossibilities. And when you come to manifestation work with that same mentality, I think you can really start to manifest some really cool things. So, yeah, I just think
Mm.
it's cool that you also found your way into this work with The Secret.
Yeah, there's so much there. One of the things that came up for me is I've recognized on my journey is like I feel like as humans we come into this matrix as kids, like completely able to be in the present moment, not worrying about yesterday. Life seems like it's going to last forever. We then grow up and we go through our conditioning with understanding time and giving ourselves permission to worry about stuff from the past and get really nervous and fearful about the future, only to realize that that's where our peace disappears. And then like if you go on a spiritual path, all the ancient teachings are like just come back to the present moment. That's all there is. And you're like, we did know
Yeah.
this shit. We came in with it. Like we just forgotten about it. So yeah, that playful element of it is such an important part. And this is also the thing with men. And I speak when I say men, I'm just talking about me included because this has been my journey as well. We
Mhm.
take life too damn seriously. Everything's so flippin' important. And it's just like, it's just like you said, a hard place to manifest from when you realize you're constantly in resistance and trying to push and force things to happen as opposed to just being in the present moment and appreciating what's already there and being playful with it because yeah, that's also how I understand it to work.
Mhm. Yeah, I've said this before on the podcast, but everything is so important and it's also not important at all. We are a human civilization just floating through space on this big rock with the sun that will one day blow up and disintegrate everything. So the things that we make so heavy and important are not important at all. Yet, as spiritual beings, the work that we do here on earth while we're here is so important to our soul's evolution and to
Hmm.
the evolution of God, the universe, whatever you believe in. So yeah, it's
Can
awesome.
I'll share a manifestation story if you want me to.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
So the secret came into my world. I think the book came out, if I remember, like 2005, 2006, somewhere around there. At the time, I was living in Johannesburg, and the version of me that was around then was like I called myself an atheist. I was in this belief system around, I would say, scientific materialism. If you couldn't prove it with science, it didn't exist for me. And so the book of The Secret was in bookstores when it came out, and I noticed this book with this like red seal on the front, and I picked it up, bought a copy of it, got it home. Somewhere in the early stages of the book, it spoke about it being one of the 12 spiritual laws, and it lost me. I just put the book down. I couldn't do anything with it. Then fast forward about maybe 10 years later, I go on this eat, pray, love journey that had me leave South Africa to go and get reconnected with myself. And I met this woman in Thailand, fall deeply in love with her. And she's like everything that I've been calling into my life. And like at the time I'd done some work on myself and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to have partnership in my life. And she's ticking all of the boxes. And then she's like, oh, have you read the book The Secret? And I'm like, yeah, of course I've read The Secret. And I'm like, oh, shit, maybe I should get polished up on the book. that relationship ended. But after she left my life, I was like, okay, let me go and relook at this. And I also then went and watched the documentary. And I still, maybe not like you spoke about the remembrance of it, but for me, there was this place of like watching it and being like, I was still a bit skeptical. There was a part of the languaging that still didn't quite land with me, even though where I was on my path, like my scientific materialism voice and way of looking at the world was still so strong. But Jack Canfield spoke about writing the check to himself that he put on the fridge for his books that eventually became like the $1 million. And so I'm like, I'm watching this documentary anyway. Let me just have fun with it. So I basically created, at the time, I just started a coaching business, and I created a Google an image that I made my Gmail wallpaper, the back of my email that said $1 million in my PayPal account by December of 2016. This was like middle of 2015. I make it my Gmail wallpaper as like an experiment for watching the documentary and just to have fun with this and play with it. And then I would proceeded to forget about it. I just didn't do anything. I carried on traveling the world, again, having fun, completely unattached to what happened. 2016, December comes and goes, nothing happens. I probably look at that wallpaper and go like, nah, doesn't work, whatever it was. Only a year later in 2017 to have like an investment that I'd made in crypto become $1 million. That was completely out of left field. Like I had no idea what was going to happen. And I just suddenly went like, oh my God, what if I'd said like a billion? There was just this moment of like things showed up in my reality that seemed to be like just, yeah, evidence of something else at play that I didn't have a reference point to understand exactly what that was. But I was like, okay, this is for me to go and understand and study a bit deeper. And that was when I was like, oh, I haven't been paying attention to this at all. Rewatched the documentary, dived into Abraham Hicks, looked at the Hermetic principles, started looking to, all of the different teachers. And yeah, that really opened up another window for me. And so I think what I've also took from that on reflection is like, take a look at something, especially if I feel resistance. There's a part of me that's like, oh, I don't know anything about this particular theme, and I judge it because of what I've heard or what I think. But often there's something there, and it doesn't mean I have to follow it as a life path, but at least spend a bit of time taking a look at it. And yeah, there was so much magic there. And like you said, there's stuff that we've probably known for ages that we just haven't been connected to again. And life is so much easier when you understand how some of these things work. And so now I'm trying to live, as you say, like in this playful present moment where I'm committed to a path, but equally unattached and not living in resistance to what it is that I want to manifest.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned Hermetics, and I've been revisiting the Hermetic principles. I actually just put in my Amazon cart the Corpus Hermeticus because I want to read the original text, which we know was at least discovered in like 6 to 800 CE.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a really old text, but they think that it came from a much older Greek text. Um, what is your favorite like Hermetic principle?
I mean, the law of vibration seems to be evident in everything, and I think especially for men who, and I always obviously saying this through my own lens of exactly what I think would be most supportive, because I think that's maybe how everybody else thinks, but obviously it's just like as soon as someone spoke about vibrational alignment, even in Abraham Hicks's stuff, a part of me turned off. I'm like, I can't see it. It doesn't make a difference. But we're at the same time, we're equally connected to and understand that there's Wi-Fi that sends signals, and we're connected to one another via a satellite, which is also vibration. And so, yeah, just understanding that everything is a vibration, and that, you know, a similar vibration is naturally going to bring things into your reality. That seems to be the one for me to live by, and recognize that that's something that you can genuinely control and have connection to. And at some level, being able to open up vibrational channels by moving energy through those channels, whether it's through higher frequencies, like through meditation or something like that, but also reconnecting to the emotional body to be able to move energy through the emotional body, or even the sexual energy, to actively move that as a way to be able to manifest and to be able to set vibrational frequency, I think is hugely powerful. So yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about that law specifically if I was to choose one.
Yeah, cool. My favorite is the law of assumption.
Mm.
Because, like I've said on the podcast before, when my biggest manifestations have come true, it's always when I was in this sort of state of surrender. And to me, the state of surrender is assumption because you can't assume that something is going to happen without surrender, right? You order something off the internet and you surrender to it coming to you because you assume that it's
Mm.
going to make it to your house.
That's
And
such a
so,
great analogy. Thank you. That's cool.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So can you talk to or speak about your work with men in particular and how joining men's circles and that sort of thing has really transformed your life and also can transform the lives of other men out there who are seeking community?
Mm. Where to start? So I think when I shared my story of how I came to men's work, inherently in that story is I think men have been told or maybe conditioned that speaking about asking for help or requesting help or sharing that you have a problem is somehow labeled as a sign of weakness. And I think in that was the very thing that kept me stuck. Like I didn't want people to know when my life was difficult, when I was battling in my business, when I was, having challenges with addictions or any of those sorts of things. And so I would keep that information to myself. And so not only does that it does a couple of things. One of them is it makes it impossible for anybody else to help me because whenever you ask me how I'm doing, I say fine. So that's the first thing. You're not even able to help me, even if you could. Secondly, it makes me think that I'm doing all of it on my own, and this is something that I need to carry by myself. And it just like an untreated wound, I think it starts to fester and it starts to get more and more and more. Um, and then layered on top of that is it destroys relationships because I don't think total trust can exist sorry, yeah, total trust can't exist without total honesty. And so if you and I were great friends and we went for a drink at the bar and you asked me how I was and I was battling and I said, fine, there's something where in the energy of your body that feels the energy of my body, and we recognize that we're beings that can feel one another long before we speak words. When you ask me how I am and I say fine, my words don't match my energy. So what happens there is you don't know exactly what happened, but you'll be like, something's up with Gareth. I don't know, I can't tell what it is, but it feels weird. And so without even knowing it, you're just like, I can't trust him. I don't know what's there. And this is what we're doing all day long. And at some level, as a society, we do this. We put masks on to be who we need to be in the boardroom or who we need to be in front of our mother-in-law or whatever that is. But I think real trust comes from saying, how are you? And then having a space to be like, wow, I'm having a difficult day. And this is what's genuinely alive for me in my inner worlds. And when I speak that out, I'm actually building trust with you. And so I actually think it happens on two levels. When I give myself permission, for example, in a circle or a space with somebody that I love and trust, to speak about what's genuinely happening inside me, not the story that I think that you want to hear from me or the story that I want the world to know, but what's genuinely inside, I trust myself more because the parts of myself that feel unexpressed have now got a voice. The part of me that's been worried about something is now spoken out loud. So I trust myself more. And then when I do that in my relationships, then those people trust me more because my words match my energy. So, you know, that's the end game. The beginning game starts with, cowboys don't cry, get back up on the horse, no tears, mate. Like all of that stuff is just programming and creating a conditioning for men that makes them think that they're less than or a loser or a failure or a girl, whatever the wording is. If you speak about your emotions, show your emotions or cry or any of those things, but as I'm explaining, without that you're actually not being truly authentic, and in many ways it's completely dishonest without being, it's wrapped up in the story of wanting to make sure that I've got my life under control or I don't want to inconvenience anybody else with my problems, but it's not being completely honest. And so if you want to build solid relationships, whether that relationship is with a partner or with your kids or in your business as a leader, you need to find a way to be able to be authentic and speak authentically about what's alive. And so, I mean, that's sort of how I got there. That's at the basis of my work. I can spend another hour on this, but yeah, I'll let that land for a second. Let me know, yeah, what comes up for you, and I'll share that.
Yeah, that's so important. I agree 100% with everything that you just said. And it makes me think about my husband, who is divine in his own way and who really he's also deeply connected to this sort of work, and thank God.
Hmm.
Because I he would probably think that I was a weirdo. But yeah, can you speak to how relationships can serve as sort of a vehicle for transformation?
So I went traveling and I did multiple different healing modalities and I found all these different ways to be able to learn to love myself. And yeah, I was like, oh, I got it now. Life's easy. I've done all this work on myself and I now get it. I know what the problem was before I didn't love myself. And I thought it was all good. Like the work is done. And then I got into a relationship. And suddenly you're like, oh no, 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 no. There's still a whole lot more to do here. And I think that nothing will reveal our inner wounds or what's unhealed inside ourselves, like our romantic relationships. And that never actually happens in the first date or the second date. There's this analogy that you never have a screaming match with your Uber driver, someone that you've only met for a couple minutes. But once you've got really deep and got to know somebody after a certain amount of time, the the mirror that the relationship becomes for all of your own stuff that's unhealed inside yourself is a really powerful way for you to be able to see what's still needs to be done inside you. And so that's how I think the relationship acts as a vehicle for transformation. A lot of my work is supporting men to consciously move through the three phases of relationship. And I'll start with why I think that's important. In over 85 years, Harvard did a study with hundreds of thousands of men where they interviewed them on their deathbed and they said to them, what were the things that made your life meaningful? It wasn't the money that they made or the companies that they'd built or the material things that they'd acquired. It was the quality of the relationships that they had in their lives. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's seemingly quite an important component of what we're doing here in this matrix. For the 85 years that we're here on this earth, or 90, however long you're going to live for, if your relationships are your most important thing that make your life meaningful, how much time are we spending learning about how to do relationships well? And for me, that answer was very little. I'm basically winging it for most of my life. I'm connecting with beings that show up because either they were on the dating app or they walked past me in a bar or something, or I met them in a boardroom or something. But then, life pulls you along, and I trust the flow of life. But I think we could do better at educating ourselves how to move through the three phases of relationship, which is selecting, maintaining, and ending relationships. How are we selecting our partners? Are we consciously choosing people, or do we just show up with somebody, connect with them, fall into partnership, go through what I call new relationship energy, super juicy in the beginning. You see the best of me, I only see the best of you, golden shadows projected on one another, only to realize in year 2, 3, 4, or 5, whoa, we're actually not that good for each other. And some of the stuff could have been easily avoided by being conscious about how we got into this. Some pretty simple stuff. Phase two is once you've selected well, you're in a relationship. How do we have difficult conversations? How do we navigate these core wounds that you definitely have and I definitely have in a relationship? How do we navigate this? What does an abandonment wound even look like? What do you need when that comes up for you? How do I support you? This is my core wound. How can you support me? And yeah, navigate your way through. And then some relationships are not meant to be forever. And when you transition out of a relationship, if you don't go through a conscious ending process, I believe that life sends you relationships and situations to continually teach you lessons until you learn them. So quite often for people, they'll have very similar relationship styles of attracting the same type of person with the same types of challenges and can't see what's happening there. It's normally, from what I understand, the fact that that person is coming to teach you a lesson that your soul needs to learn in this incarnation, that until you learn, you just keep attracting the same again. So the post game of how you consciously transition out of a relationship, I think, is important. So yeah, I think they're hugely powerful. I think in terms of what we came here to learn, relationships, raising kids, and then if you choose to start a business, I think those become some of your biggest teachers in this lifetime.
Yeah, well said. Uh, So for men who are out there and maybe they're seeking a relationship, a romantic partner, and they're stuck in a cycle. They've maybe not recognized the pattern that they've been perpetuating, or maybe they have. What would be your advice to them to be able to, I don't know if it's healing that needs to happen, or how could they consciously choose, like you said, the partner for them?
Mm, such a beautiful question. I believe that everything in our lives is a reflection of the relationship that we have with ourselves. So I have a program called From Solo to Soulmate, and the whole teaching is that the soulmate that we're all looking for is actually the relationship that we have with ourselves. There's no other person that's going to be with me from the moment I'm in this matrix until I eventually transition out of this body throughout my entire life, except me. This is the longest relationship I'm ever going to have. And it's also the most important relationship I'm ever going to have. And so if we're looking to manifest solid, healthy relationships with beings in our life, it's only going to come as a function of the reflection of the solid, healthy, intimate relationship that I have with myself. And so that's where the work begins. And that can actually look like a period of celibacy, a period of falling deeply in love with myself. What are my core wounds? What is it that I need for myself? And in when it comes to relationship and calling partnership in, this is the law of vibration. You attract someone that's a similar vibration to you. So if you want an adventurous, exciting, out there, you know, person who's committed and I don't know, meditates, whatever those things are, start doing them yourself. Those are the things that are going to shift you into that energetic frequency that's going to bring that person into your reality. So this is the law of attraction, the law of vibration, all at the same time, but recognizing that you will attract exactly what you are, not what you want. So I could sit here, but if I'm looping in addiction and being dishonest, and I'm looking for somebody to show up in my life that I'm looking to be an angel and, everything that I want in a partner, adventurous, and they show up, I'm going to project all of that into that person, and it's not going to last because I'm not going to be able to keep that frequency of what comes in is not matching who I am. So yeah, that's really the work, and there is a place to be able to start setting your intention and to start orientating yourself to what you want. So like just a journaling exercise of what do you really want in a partner? What do you want this person to be? Like what do you want? What shared interests do you want? Like I dive a bit deeper to this in my relationship training containers, but like, the work of John Demartini and his work around values factors is recognizing that we always put our time, attention, and money into the things that are our highest values. You want to make sure that you've got a partner that shares similar values. Sometimes that doesn't always happen. We choose a partner based on who they are or what car they drive or how they look or how good the sex is or something like that. That doesn't last for a long time. The values are the things that are going to sustain you over time. And you need to make sure that you align those with your partner. So knowing, for example, what your own values are is an important way to be able to get clear on the type of person that you want to come in. When you meet somebody, having grown up conversations by the time you start to unfold into a relationship that sounds like, you know, what are your values? What are things that you're interested in? Do you want to have kids? Don't you want to have kids? Like these are important conversations to have up front that could save you and your partner a huge amount of time if there's no
Mhm.
alignment. Where there's synergy, keep playing. And as your relationship gets deeper, keep checking in. But if there's some fundamental stuff up front, you could save yourself a huge amount of time and heartache because, when you're 4 years in, and you realize, oh, you want to travel, I don't want to travel, and now we've got a kid. Like, there's quite a lot moving in that particular constellation that could make it really difficult if you just had a conversation up front. So, yeah, those are some of the themes I think that could support men. But above all of those, definitely relationship with self. Become your own best lover. Yeah, fall deeply in love with yourself. Protect yourself. Forgive yourself. Love yourself, because what I understand comes from that is when you truly love yourself, then you give yourself permission to go after what you want. If you don't truly love yourself, Gareth, the man of 15 years ago, I'm not enough. Oh, she's gorgeous. Then I will be enough because I have that in my life. That was some sort of signal. It's an unhealthy way to get into a relationship. When I'm strong in a relationship with myself, I go after what I want. And then I also hold boundaries because, oh, this is not what I want. I value myself. I love myself enough that I'm going to hold these boundaries because this person doesn't doesn't flow with what it is that I really want. So everyone talks about, own your desires, set your boundaries. You can, but you really need to love yourself first because those are the things that help you know, first of all, what you want. And then, you can only put a boundary around something that you protect and love. That's why you have a boundary. If you don't love and want to protect yourself, it doesn't seem that a boundary would even be necessary. So, yeah, those are some of the ideas. I'd love to hear how's it been with your partner? How long have you guys been together?
Yeah, we met in 2017
Mm-hmm.
and we got married in 2022. So, was that like 8 years? Almost 8 years that we've been
Mm-hmm.
together. Yeah. I chose him because he matched me vibrationally on our first date, and
Mm-hmm.
he basically told me who I was without knowing me a whole lot, just from the one conversation that we had. And before, the dates that I had been on before, and my past relationships, that values thing that you were just saying, that really hit hard because all of those men wanted children. And I've always known from when I was a kid that I didn't want kids of my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always kind of playing this part of like a doting girlfriend and like, yeah, I would love to have children one day and like, just kind of pretending. But
Mm-hmm.
internally, it didn't match what my true feelings were.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one of the values we talked about on our very first date. And it was a breath of fresh air when he said that he also didn't want children. Um, and he called me out and he told me that I was a witch. And I was like, at that point in my life, I was still not like okay with using that word because of the negative stigma that is attached to the word witch.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, ha ha ha, like, no, I'm not. And once we started to date further and I started getting more into this work because of him being also deeply in the spiritual development, space,
Mm-hmm.
I started to accept the parts of me that I was denying, which was a beautiful coming home to myself through my partner. I don't even know if I've like kind of expressed that to, maybe I have, but oh, it's bringing tears to my eyes. Yeah, I think finding the partner who allows you to just be is super important. And yeah, to that value point, yes, shares the same values and that sort of thing, which we did like right off the bat was just there was so much, I don't even know the word. It was just chemistry. Like I just knew, like I knew him before I knew him.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment I walked up on our first date, the moment I walked up to him, my internal being recognized him. And I was like, oh, I know him, but I don't know how I know him, but I know him. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so for me it was a spiritual thing for me to find him.
Mm. So beautiful. So what's like besides the spiritual path, how else do you define the values that you guys share? What else is important for both of you that you match on those values?
Mm. Ooh, tough question. We are both animal lovers, deeply,
Mm.
deeply love cats and dogs. Um, we are very we love our solitude. We're both pretty introverted. It's funny because I always hear that saying that like, opposites attract, and I'm like, he and I are not opposite, like almost at all. Well,
Mm-hmm.
in in certain things, like I tend to be a little bit more into like the beauty of things. Like my house has to be beautiful. Like I love beautiful things. Probably, the cosmetologist in me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas he's simplistic, minimalist, like nothing really bothers him. He doesn't really care about fancy things or pretty things. And I
Mm-hmm.
like diamonds and shiny things. Um, so we're opposite in like that sort of sense, but we are this, I feel like we are almost the same person. We are two 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 different sides of the same coin. I don't even know if that's the right analogy, but yeah, so other values of ours is that we love to travel. We both are foodies. We love to explore other cities, and yeah, and eat in those cities.
Cool.
We are we are both into psychedelics and plant medicine. Well, I guess that's spiritual, so that doesn't count.
No, that's cool. That is up there. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because that's just a path, you know. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah. What other value, like what would you define as a value that's not spiritual?
I mean, I would say you've touched some of them, you know, like do you want to travel or do you want to stay home? Things like personal practices, you know, the idea of someone being on a committed path to personal development or somebody who's maybe not that interested in that, you know, again, probably a spiritual path as well.
Yeah.
Um, Health and body, for example, might be one. You know, does the person have an interest in that? And then it can be some simple stuff, you know, like music. You know, do you like
Mm.
music? You know, and again, these values, how I understand them, they stack in order, you know. So I love music. My partner is okay with music, you know, but it's not a game
Yeah.
changer for me, you know. But if I was a musician and I geeked out all day talking about music and that was a high value for me, then this may not be the relationship for me. So some of them maybe don't seem so significant, you know, as you look at it in the stack of values, but you tend to put, I mean, for me, for example, building my business is an important value, you know, like making an impact in the world, serving my mission is an important value for me. My partner is
Yeah.
the same, you know, so she has a very clear line of work that she's been focused on and been building her career. So, you know, we've also chosen not to have kids.
Mm.
And the internal negotiation that I had with myself is that extra energy and attention and financial opportunity that I have. Selfishly, I'm also going to put towards my own adventure. So I want to keep traveling because, like you, we also love to travel and go to different places and eat amazing food when we're there. And I want to serve the world. I want to use my mission to reach more men. And yeah, I also see this. I think we touched on this before we started recording. Your mission grows you. You know, I go in service to serve other men, and along the way, it also points out all of my own stuff. You know, so when I do a launch and it doesn't do the numbers that I had hoped that it would, that old voice comes back and it's like, oh, maybe you shouldn't do it, or you're not good enough. And it's like, no, that's just an old story, and I'm not going to hold on to that. But you know, your business also becomes a reflection of the unoppressed, you know, unintegrated work or the healing that still needs to happen. So yeah, that's also been a part of our shared values is to talk about that stuff. And then we love beautiful spaces, so like making our home and you know renting cool Airbnbs and creating spaces to be able to create and spend time is also a shared value that we have.
I love that. Yeah,
Mm.
that's funny that you mentioned music because similarly, my husband, he actually used to be a part of a like weekend band. I don't know what to call it, but like
Hmm.
they would play at like local bars and stuff like that. He was drums. And I love I love music, but I don't hold it at the same level that he does, but he also has opened my eyes up to a whole world of music I didn't even know existed, which is really cool because we're actually leaving in like 5 or 6 days to go to well, we're going to Salt Lake City, but then we're going to Denver and Boulder to see a band I never knew existed until him, and it's now one of my favorite bands. And
Oh, cool.
so yeah, yeah.
What's
So
the name? I want to check them out.
they're called Leprous. They're a
Lapras.
Norwegian band, and
Okay.
they're like prog rock. I don't know,
Okay.
progressive rock.
Cool.
Um, So yeah, it's funny that your partner also is a little bit less into the music than you are, but
Hmm.
yeah, whenever we check our Spotify like Wrapped, our 1 year
Hmm.
wrap, his is always like, lots like very music heavy, and
Yeah.
mine is like podcasts. Like I all I do is listen to podcasts.
Uh-huh. Yeah, cool. I want to share something with you, and I haven't tested it so long. I only heard it more recently. There's something about relationships that I heard from one of my teachers that was quite often what happens in a relationship is we quite often are attracted to somebody that possesses something that's emergent in us.
Mm.
And when I first heard that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I went back and took a look at like my past few relationships, and it was so interesting. The girl that I was speaking about in Thailand when I did the secret whole revisit of the secret, at that time she was like super on her spiritual path, and she was like a meditator and a yogi, and I was not any of those really yet. And I was attracted to her for a number of different things, but that felt like it was becoming emergent in me at the time. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then my partner now, I was still just starting my career into holding spaces for men and being sort of a retreat holder and a space holder and a coach and stuff. And she had already been doing it for 10 years. And so there was this real space where this came up. And does that feel, how does that land for you if I say that to you? Like, was there something emergent in your partner that, or something emergent in you that you saw in him when you guys connected, or the other way around? Like, I'm interested to hear that question answered by other people because I
Yeah.
haven't spent much time with it. But when they said it to me, and I look back over a couple of relationships, it did seem to land that there was something about to come alive in me that was
Hmm.
expressed in the other person that was like almost drawing me in, like life pulling me in this specific relationship because of something like that.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. So to understand that the point in my life where I was when I met my husband, we have to go back to the relationship that came before, which was deeply narcissistic, abusive relationship. So I was coming out of, and this was like maybe 2 or 3 years after I'd gotten out of that situation. That relationship taught me things I needed to bring into this relationship that I didn't realize were sort of my blind spot when it came to looking for a partner and selecting a partner. And so when I came into this relationship, I had, well, in the previous relationship, had completely abandoned my witchcraft, my spirituality, God, the universe. Like I abandoned all that because of him. When I got out of it, it took me a long time, maybe a year, year and a half, to finally start to come back into this work. And when I met my husband, he was he was on the upwards trajectory of sort of deepening his spirituality, but he'd also come from a place that was a little bit more spiritual than I was coming from.
Mm,
So I think when looking back, when I'd met him, it was just starting to reemerge from me, all of the spiritual work, all of the teachings, and me finally finding plant medicine and books Joe Dispenza and Ram Dass and all of these like really great spiritual teachers I discovered through him. So I was sort of emerging as the spiritual teacher when we had met. So thank you for
mm,
bringing that to light because looking back on it now, like it's pretty apparent to me now. But I hadn't really asked that question. So thank you.
yeah, cool.
And I think for him, he was probably um, emerging in a way where I helped him to see his shadows. So the parts of him that he suppressed,
Mhm.
and allowed him to, or held space for him to allow those things to come to the surface so that they can be healed.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had mentioned something earlier about community and how the Harvard study had said that or concluded that men typically were more like it was the deep connections in relationships that were the things that really meant something to them in their lives. And it made me think of the blue zones. The blue
Mm,
zones of the world are places, if anybody who's listening to this doesn't know, where people tend to live to 100 years old or older. And this is like a very common thing for them to do that. And so one of the major synchronicities between all of these blue zones is community, is that they have a deep sense of community and they're close with their neighbors, they're close with their families.
hmm.
And so I just found it so interesting that when men come together in community, and maybe you can speak about this because you hold retreats for men, and I would love for you to dive into what your retreats are like.
Mhm.
For men, when they connect in these ways with each other, how maybe even it extends their lifetime, right? Because
Mm.
if these people in blue zones are living to 100, a
Mhm.
lot of them are men, right? And so how community kind of extends the life of a person and also allows for deep healing and all of that. So can you speak to some of that?
That's a beautiful way to approach it. Thank you. So, um, the men's circle, the space, the technology of men's work and men coming together to talk about stuff and have what you spoke about earlier. You said women are naturally good at doing this stuff and men don't have these opportunities. We did. This is not new stuff. There was when we lived in a more simple world where we lived in community, as in, we didn't all leave in the morning to go and work in a factory or in an office, and we were working together and living together. Men would inherently spend time together working on things that supported the community. And that meant that we would be finding resources, building shelters, hunting, securing certain elements for the tribe. And if we sat around together and we weren't honest with one another, that would make a rupture in the trust that was important to support our families and our community. It was extremely important that we were open and honest about what was happening with ourselves, because that was what built the trust inside holding our communities together. And so it men sitting around in circle is something that we've done for thousands of years until we became more, and for those listening, inverted commas, more sophisticated. And we decided, oh no, we could actually just farm things out and we could just trade with one another and we don't need to live in communities and we can get more done if we centralize our workforce, and then the Industrial Revolution. And so there's been a lot of progress that's come from that. But I think the cost of men sitting together in community has been one of the challenges that you've spoken into, because now men sit together in a boardroom, and I'm not going to be arriving there to talk about my sex addiction in a boardroom, because firstly, that's not done. Nobody cares. It's not the right platform. And so I don't really have a space for that. But that's also where I spend 70% of my waking life is in the workplace, providing for the family, putting more money on the table, and following the mostly capitalist dream that we've been handed in the West. So that's one element. The community that I've built is called Fathers, Sons, Brothers. And I think that there's also something in what's lost in how we live in our lives now, which is isolated nuclear families, which has disconnected us from the intergenerational wisdom that used to exist when we had kids that would be playing together and they had access to the men and women in their sort of parenting middle ages, but also access to their grandparents and maybe even their great grandparents. And there's a lot of wisdom that comes from that lineage that's broken off when we don't live with our parents anymore. The grandparents see their grandkids, if they live in the same city, maybe an hour or two a week, maybe less, depending on how that family's set up. My mom and dad live in South Africa. My brother, who has kids, lives in Canada. They see their grandkids, once or twice a year. So it does two things. It disconnects the grandkids from the magic and wisdom that comes from being around elders that have got a lot of wisdom to share. They're coded completely differently, and there's magic for youngsters and the elders to receive from one another. But then for grandparents, and even I notice this for men, when a man spends his entire life building his identity around being the father and the provider and the breadwinner for the family, maybe he's got a corporate gig. At 65, he's like, thanks, that's it for you. Go home. He doesn't know how to be with his kids. He doesn't quite know how to be with his life. His entire sense of purpose is wrapped up in a job that's basically from one day to the next. 70% of your time was at that job. Now you're at home. Someone else has filled your shoes. There's no big going away party. It's a few drinks and then you're out with it. You've spent maybe 25, 30, 40 years building your career there. And men often lack meaning. They don't quite know what to do with themselves. So, finding a sense of purpose is, I think, the most important thing for a man, and knowing what that is. At least our elders, we could sit around a space and be able to connect into them and say, hey, what can I learn from you? What are the things that me in my age of life, and I'm in my 40s, what could I be learning from the men that have walked this path ahead of me so that I don't make those same mistakes twice? And how do I connect to younger men in their, late teens, early 20s, 30s, to the wisdom of elder men? Because I think we have gifts for each other across all of these generations. So yeah, that's some of the stuff that I think exists in blue zones. People, you'd have your family there, you would work, definitely not the long hours we were doing. A lot of those blue zones, people worked on the land in community farming, eating food that didn't travel too far. There's something to be said about eating food that hasn't traveled too far. Nature has a really solid way of adapting vibrationally to be in harmony with everything in its surroundings. So, if you're very close to your food and you're unwell, the plants will actually start to create specific components of vibrations that are going to support you when you're in close proximity to them. If you're eating strawberries that are grown in New Zealand, you live in South Africa, those things have, been sprayed and all of that story. So, there's so many different energetics that come into, what happens in the blue zones. And I think there's something for men in the ability to be able to be around people that we love, having a lower stress life, having meaning. Even as a grandparent, your meaning is to look after the grandkids while I'm working in the field. So there's a lot in that. And so that's also what we're trying to create at Father, Sons, Brothers. We're creating spaces for men to be able to come together. We have online circles that we do where men come together once a month and we tackle some topics like leadership, like death, sex, power, money, some of the stuff that we don't often have spaces to talk about. And then we really want to anchor those into in-person men's circles where people sit in Pennsylvania and they sit in circle with men that they maybe used to be running buddies, and for every second week they spend a couple of hours with a framework working through some course material and going on this journey together, but trying to rebuild this technology and access what we had before so that there is a sense of meaning, so that there is a camaraderie to be able to reconnect to this wisdom of men's work. So yeah, those are some of the ways that we're doing this. And yeah, it's a journey, because the what I said at the beginning, at the what's so frustrating. It's just where we are. What's frustrating for me is the very thing that I needed 10 years ago was the very thing I wasn't going to do, speak about it, And so part of me is like, come on, everybody get together and speak about it. And you bump up against a lot of resistance because people are like, not a fuck. I don't want to speak about it. This is the very thing that I don't want anybody to know because, this is what I think is going to be, make me look weak, or I'm in competition or something like that. So yeah, it's early days, but I have this saying that I think men's work is today where yoga and meditation were 30 years ago. It's coming into
Oh.
the collective consciousness. I, from what I can tell, a man that is in a leadership position that is not doing shadow work, it's a red
Mhm.
flag for me, because
Mm.
it's like that's pretending that you don't have anything up with you, and you don't get shadow reflection from your board of directors or the people that employ you. So if you're a leader in a business, I'm saying, please surround yourself with men who are equals with you, or at least don't bring any hierarchy into it, where you sit in a circle once a week or once a month and say, what am I not seeing here that I could have pointed out to me? Because that's going to make me a better leader. I'm going to love myself and be more integrated as a man, and therefore a better leader. I think if we just look at the current leadership crisis that I see in the States and in the West at the moment, it's just unintegrated men, immature representations of masculinity. And yeah, I think if men don't go through initiation, don't have access to the space, hiding all the stuff, this is, I think, what we see in the leadership crisis that we have. So yeah, I think it's a long way of coming around to your question, but I think, yeah, to have a space to be able to receive reflection from people that you love and trust that'll tell you straight, said with love, is I can see that being the way to heal
Mhm.
what looks like the crisis in our world at the moment.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that men doing this work is important to society as a whole, right? Men who are responsible, who are taking responsibility for their feelings, for the toxic masculine sides of them, who consciously want to become better men is deeply important to society.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to just share something if you don't mind. I like to ask people not to use the word toxic masculinity, because toxic
Mhm.
seems like it's broken or unsolvable. I would rather say like immature or
Okay.
unhealthy expressions of masculinity, because I think,
Mhm.
just to say something's toxic, and this is just how we've grown to speak about it.
Mhm.
It's like it's broken, and it's not actually broken. It's just an immature expression of masculinity for men, because we're living in competition, because we haven't done the work to get connected to our core wounds. So honestly, I believe that is what's going to heal the world. That's why I'm so passionate about doing what I'm doing, because I can see in South Africa there's the world I lived in was very much a culture of competition, and I'm not going to talk about it. And there was so much like dishonesty because people just weren't mature enough to be able to have hard conversations with their partners or even with their friends, or there's nothing, it's more courageous to have a hard conversation than it is to lie about something, And so it's like, if you want to be a courageous man, go and have a hard conversation. Go and talk about what's happening in your inner worlds. And I think if our leaders could be in this place of being able to be vulnerable and say, you know what, actually, I don't know what I'm doing today. Please, can I get some feedback from everybody else instead of pretending and carrying on these immature expressions of masculinity. Once they start to mature, I think this is what raises consciousness on the planet. So yeah, it's definitely for us to do. And I think women have a role to play as well. I think women should be supporting men, the same way if in a tribe somebody does something wrong, we don't just outcast them and cancel them. We find out what they did. We find a way to help integrate them, make them responsible for sure, but then find a way to integrate them and love them and accept them and bring them back into the tribe. And so where women just continually blame men or the masculine, that doesn't, that's not the way to heal it. We need to, as women, hold a space to encourage men to feel safe and to step into this work and to, yeah, be vulnerable. But it's difficult to do if you're being beaten down by your wife every single day, or that all men are toxic. Like that's a hard place to then be like, okay, well, I'm going to go first and be vulnerable. There's a loving element that comes from holding space for men that I think is an important part that women can play as well. So yeah, it's both of us. I think men need to take responsibility, because I'm definitely not saying the challenges we see in the world has largely been at the hands of men. Like a lot
Yeah.
of the stuff that we've, capitalism, but just as a function of what we've done in the world, has been at the hands of men. And they've had an immature level of consciousness. And that's just how it is. And I think it's collectively ours to solve together as men, supported by women, because the world needs both men and women.
Hmm. Yeah. No, thank you for bringing that to light, because words carry vibration and they hold power. So yeah, that
Hmm.
makes a lot of sense to not use such diminishing language as
Mm.
toxic. And yeah, I like immature masculinity, because I think there is always an opportunity for people to grow if they are willing to see their flaws and willing to do the work to heal themselves, so that they can then make the world a better place. And I look at our leaders and I see them as these 6-year-old children who didn't ever get what they wanted, and now they're
Hmm.
just in a power struggle. And,
Yep.
it's, we would be living in such a more harmonizing or harmonistic society if everybody just healed those wounds. And, that's part of the reason being a human and coming to Earth is so that our souls can evolve and can go through those hardships. And, if the whole world was just suddenly healed, there would be no purpose for our souls to incarnate. So it makes sense that there are, people who don't want to do this kind of work, or who think that it's all, woo woo and fluffy, and it's for weak people, but it's actually for the strongest people, because to do this work is so difficult. You have to look at the parts of you that were not uh, the best, that you're embarrassed by, that you have shame around. And when
Hmm.
you look at shame, it is so confronting, and it's so hard to look at the things that you've done, or the things that you wish that you've done that you didn't do, and to have a place that come to it with a compassion and empathy, and to allow it to bubble to the surface. Pick a modality, whatever modality works for you, and heal that part of you. It's harder than just, being the leader who takes, and doesn't leave anything for the rest, and who do horrible things. It's easier for them to be in that sort of lower vibrational state then to allow themselves to heal that lower vibrational state so that they can then rise. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what the answer is there about our soul's evolution and society, because it seems like the reason for us to be here is to repeat karmic cycles until we learn a lesson.
Hmm.
And yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, but that was just kind of a
No.
stream of consciousness.
You know,
Um,
I've there's something in that I'll share. I think from what I can tell, I'd actually like to reframe it. Because as you said, the words that we use really matter, and some sense that we're always going to be working on our healing is at some level talking about the fact that we're not healed, and the conversation about that keeps you stuck in the frequency of having to continually heal.
Mhm.
But from what I can tell, my wound, the fear of rejection that manifested as sex addiction in my life, is actually my gift. So your wounds become your wisdom. And so rather than seeing it as like some problem that you want to try and get away from, just recognize that this is the unique gift that you've been gifted to this world, that is your responsibility to integrate. And from that is going to be not only your biggest teacher, from which you will involve this karmic cycle that you speak of, because I think that's what it is, but that's also going to be the thing that you have a lived experience that you've worked through to be able to support others on the same path to raise the vibration and raise consciousness. And so instead of us looking at it as like, oh my God, I have this horrible thing, and people have had horrible things in their life, if we could just reframe that and be like, you know what, this is my gift. This is going to be my biggest teacher. And it could look like rape, abuse, trauma, whatever those things are. We've all been come into this matrix with something, including the fact that we live in a capitalist world that continually tells us that we're not enough. You're not enough until you have this car or this makeup or blah, blah, blah. Like that is continually being bombarded at you. So just to let all of that shit go, you're enough. You've said it already. We're like, you're a divine expression of God. And if you think that you're wounded, that's almost an insult to the creator. You've been given a unique opportunity to integrate something that is going to be uniquely yours to bring to the world. What is it? Find it and integrate it and share it with the world, because that's what I think we're here to do. So I think there's something in that which is like, yeah, it looks painful, and collectively we're all going through it where we're not integrating it. And so that's I think what we're seeing in the collective. There's nothing for us to do out there. It's all for us to do. Ramdas is the only work we need to do is in the privacy of our own hearts,
Mhm.
love and accept yourself completely, and then watch the world start to change pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The meaning of the kingdom of God is within you is it actually means to go within to find the kingdom of God, to find heaven, you go within.
Yeah.
It is not outside of you. It is not in the material things that you manifest into your life. And that's all beautiful. And you can choose to manifest whatever you want. If you want jets and expensive cars and houses, then that's your divine right. But if you come at those things from a place of wounds, quote unquote, that have been unhealed, then they transform into things like greed and
Hmm.
those things that we're told are quote unquote sins. Um,
Hmm.
and when you manifest from a place of pure love, adoration, and not from a place of ego, that is when you can truly manifest what you want on the outside, because you've healed the thing on the inside. So if you want something because it's going to make you appear to society that you're, a wealthy person and that makes you worthy, if you don't feel
Hmm.
worthy inside, one, you can lose it all like very quickly. It won't last. Or you start to repeat or you start to perpetuate these like more extreme cases of capitalism, right? Like the Elon Musks of the world. You kind of start to come into that sort of personality type. And if you heal the wound that is saying, I'm not worthy, and you start to manifest things that you want, the nice houses, the nice cars, you have a deeper appreciation for them. And they match you on an energetic level, a vibrational level, you are a match to those luxurious things. And
Mm.
so you have a better chance of hanging on to them because you appreciate, you have gratitude for those types of things. So, yeah,
Yeah,
words,
they're like they're coming from a place of abundance, not from a place of lack. You
right,
manifest
right.
from this place of like it's enough and oh, it's beautiful, I have it in my life. But the
Hmm.
other is from a place of scarcity. For me, there's this inquiry continually, which is the same thing. It's like it's for me a binary choice. Is my choice from fear or from love? Like in every single moment, there's that sort of binary choice, which is like, as you said, am I calling this into my life so that I can appear worthy? Underneath that is
Hmm.
fear. I'm not calling
Yeah.
this into my life because it's just amazing. And, it would be amazing to have this beautiful house or this opportunity or travel. Like that's coming from a place of love. And it always comes down to that binary for me because it could come from either place. And you could even manifest something into your life and be wealthy. But if it's coming from a place of fear or scarcity, like there's always that's going to perpetuate the greed. I need more and more because that's just never ending. That wound's not getting any better because it's not
Mhm.
integrated with love.
Right, right. And yeah, to your point, you said something earlier about, I just lost it. Oh my gosh, what? It was there and then it was gone. I don't know. Maybe it'll come back to me. But
Sure.
anyway, so what can men who are in relationships with women, what can those women do to better support their men in their healing journeys?
I don't think I've been asked that before. Let me start with this. This is what's coming through me as you ask that question.
Hmm.
I think there's a space where it's important for men not to turn their partners into their therapists. Meaning, yes, shadow work from our partner. Yes, there's an opportunity for us to grow together. But there are certain things that as a man, I'm going to dance with in my life that my partner in a woman's body may never actually understand. And so I think encouraging your man to have a trusted circle of men, not just drinking buddies and not just workmates or paddle mates, but a genuine men's circle that's come together for a specific reason to sit together in circle and to practice this skill of speaking authentically what's inside is the space to be able to heal what's going on because you know we do have different codes and societal roles and stuff like that. And I know it's shifting, and I know that there's quite a lot of conversation around this, but I do think men in general have got like a very specific story about how to be a man in the world, and there's women that have got a different story. And it's quite hard for a man to talk to his partner and be like, hey, this is what I'm battling with, because you've got different ways of seeing the world just because you're born in a woman's body and what the role of women has been in society. So I think to support a man would be to encourage him to go and find a space to be able to, if they want to do this work, because the other thing is you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make them drink. They've got to actually want to be in this space. But I think there is something where in relationship, if a man wants to do the work and he doesn't find a men's group, he's going to be continually asking his wife for shadow feedback continually. And that turns them into the therapist and kills the intimacy, for example, because you have to be able to switch between these various polarities in relationship. And I think if you spend too long talking about all of your challenges to your partner, they become, yeah, your counselor, and then there's not actually space for eros and intimacy to move in the relationship. So I think that would probably be one of those. And like you said earlier, women tend to do this easier than men. So I think it needs to be share gently, share my podcast, share these opportunities, and get men really in this opportunity to see the benefit of what it is. And my work, I'll just share with you, is I think it's almost rebranding men's work because a lot of men think that sitting in a men's circle is like Alcoholics Anonymous, or it really is seen as a place where losers come together to crown each other and have a hug at the end of it. And it's like, it's going to be hard to get a man who really cares about himself and the bravo part of himself to go and do this work. And so, yeah, that's why I'm positioning it more, as I said at the beginning, of talking about integrated leadership, which is integrating these parts of ourselves through a men's circle so that I can be a better leader. It's almost like a sneaky rebrand that I'm working on to get men to recognize that if I want to be a new paradigm leader, the leader of tomorrow, It's to recognize that we have work to do. Don't pretend we don't. We all have work to do. And yeah, what is that and how do I do that? And so that's sort of how I'm positioning it. Because when I do that work, as I said, stepping into a men's circle for me is for me to be able to get reflections back of the parts of myself that are unintegrated. And I see that in
Mhm.
my men's circle. And again, this is just prioritizing my most important relationship. As soon as I start to integrate those parts, I now have more capacity to love myself and I show up better in my romantic relationships and as a leader and as a father and as a functioning human in society.
Mm. So earlier we were talking about, and you just brought the word up again, and I wanted to go there, but I forgot.
Mm.
The word self-love. I
Mm-hmm.
had I had a little conversation about this with another guest where I had expressed that when I think about self-love, it's intangible for me. I can very easily conceptualize the love that I have for my husband or for my parents or my brother or, whoever. But when it comes to self-love, it's almost ungraspable.
Mm.
Can you, for anybody who might be feeling the same way, and through all of this work, I've come to understand it in a different way for myself. But for somebody who might also be feeling like, I don't know what self-love actually looks like. What is self-love?
Mm.
How does it feel? How does it feel to love yourself truly? The way that you can feel in your body the love that you have for a partner or for a parent. How do you feel self-love?
Mm-hmm. It's the ultimate question. I think we've come to this planet with these these wounds that I think we're going to integrate in this lifetime or we're not. And I think once we see those and learn to love those, that's going to be the work to do. I think the way that I teach this is I like to look at the self as there's not just this being that I call Gareth, and there's stuff called parts work or inner family systems. And I've actually, without even knowing what that was, I had this work stream through me, which I've called the inner kingdom, and it really recognizes that it came for me to recognize at different times in my life, I'd be walking along and the voice that's talking in my head continually, it's not always the same voice. So, first of all, there's the awareness that there's a voice. It's like, oh, Jesus, all day I'm talking to myself. There's a continual stream of blah, blah, blah that's happening in my reality. That's level one, recognizing that. Level two is recognizing that it's not always the same person. It's not always, Gareth the leader. There's a version of me that's a people pleaser that at sometimes he's the one who's got the microphone and he's the one who's controlling the shots. And then there's a version of me who's the seductress, and that's where my sex addiction was. The seductress who knows very easily how to say the right things and schmooze and be that part. And so I've actually recognized over time, I've actually built a relationship with these various citizens inside my kingdom and recognized that I have these different parts of myself. And just like a healthy kingdom requires an integrated, well loved, everybody's heard and seen and respected citizens, the same is true for the self. And the self that is Gareth really has multiple different voices inside me. And this work starts to touch on the work of archetypes. We all have the ability to be able to be a victim and a rescuer and the prince and the king and the queen and the wounded child. We all have these parts inside ourselves. And I think it's about building a relationship with them. So I actually have a relationship with my 6-year-old wounded child whose name is Charlie. And he is the people pleaser that was a polite boy so that I could get the love of my mother and my father. And I went out into the world with that characteristic. And if you don't know that that part's there, it's hard to love it. And so recognizing these voices, knowing who they are, knowing how old they are, recognizing at some point in our lives they played a very important role for us. Those roles may or may not be relevant in the, as a grown up, but they're definitely not. What tends to happen is we take the people please. I'll use that as an example, and that becomes my default strategy throughout my life. Meaning, as a kid, I recognized when I was polite and well mannered and looked after everybody else in the room, I got love of my parents. And when I went to friends' houses, I went like that and I got the love of their parents. I was like, okay, this is how I'll be. And so I'm suddenly people pleasing everywhere. But as I said at the beginning, that's not always honest because it always takes into account the desires of everybody else in the room. And nobody knows my truth because I'm so busy trying to make sure that everybody else is okay. And that particular archetype for me has been so strong. But Charlie's 6 years old. And what I noticed in my work is I'm now talking on my podcast, talking about sex addiction. Some part of me, and this is how it manifested. So I would be like, I've got all these ideas. I've got to go and create a podcast. Some part of me is kicking and screaming. I've felt so much resistance to turn on the camera and to create something. I've built all the processes. I've got a business model. I've got the offer. I've done all the work. Some part of me can't do it. So I check in with my inner kingdom, sit in meditation, take a few breaths. Okay, who's there? Who's making a noise at the moment? Charlie. Charlie, what's up, dude? There's some story running in my experience that's concerned that when I share a video on Facebook, a friend of my mom's might be concerned about me talking about sex or drugs or something that's going to trigger that person, which will trigger my mom. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. What is that? There's like I'm 45 years old building a business committed to my mission, but I've got a 6-year-old sitting at the boardroom table saying we can't do a Facebook Live because we're going to be talking about sex. It's like, okay, let's take a breather here. Charlie, thank you. We love you. And you're safe. Everything's going to be fine. But we're 45 now and we've got important work to do. We can't be like creating a whole story inside ourselves because we're worried about this particular part. And so recognizing these parts, and this is also where the maturing comes in. Like we're maturing these different parts of ourselves so that the being that I call Gareth is a more mature expression of myself.
Mm.
I share that it's in a long way of and creating this analogy of, once I love all of those parts, you love the whole. And that's how I experience it. Like, what are the voices inside your head? Who are the parts of you that you've kicked out of the kingdom? You don't want to feel that, or you feel shame, or you feel embarrassed about those parts. Treat them exactly the same way as you would a 6-year-old boy that you really love and you want to invite back into the inner family or the inner kingdom. Maybe a family is a better way to think about it. Bring them in, love them, hold them, and don't let them call the shots all the time because they're 6 or 10 or whatever. You have different times in your life where you've got different archetypes that you adopted. So that's one way that I think about self-love, so that's one. I'll share one which may be a little edgy for some of your listeners, but it's been a big one for me because of my strong connection with intimacy. A self-pleasuring practice that is really just for yourself, even when I'm in relationship or in a marriage or something like that. Becoming my own best lover is cultivating time to cultivate intimacy with myself. What that does is it means that I'm not outsourcing my pleasure or getting turned on to pornography, fantasies, or my partner. And so a self-love practice for me includes a self-intimacy or self-pleasuring practice that is, yeah, just getting reconnected to the body, touching my body the way that it wants to be touched. And yeah, doing that as a gift to myself to cultivate self-love with my body. And, sometimes we don't often do that, and for men, it's not often done with that level of consciousness and awareness. We do have a self-pleasuring practice that looks like masturbation, but often it's like connected to pornography or connected to running fantasies in our head, and sometimes often feeling guilty and shameful about it. Another way to cultivate self-love is to become your own best lover. And the best way to do that is to be able to be self-activated by developing a healthy self-pleasuring practice so that when you come to your relationships, your intimate relationships with your partners, it's not your husband's responsibility or my partner's responsibility for her to turn me on. I can activate myself. And then you come to your relationship full and you're not outsourcing your pleasure. So that's another way to actually develop that, to just come back into deep love and acceptance and gratitude with the physical body.
Yeah, yeah, both of those things, they speak to me a lot. One of my students who she's in my program right now, the Woo Woo Writers Workshop, she's actually a parts work teacher. And so
Mm.
she's been teaching me a lot about parts work. And when you said about recognizing the 6-year-old in you, that resonated so much because when I was in Costa Rica with my husband and we did like an ayahuasca retreat, and we were in sharing circle, and one of the meditations was to meet your inner child, and this was the first experience that I'd ever had meeting my inner child, and
Mm-hmm.
it was so beautiful and so moving, and yeah, it kind of was like, wow, I was so cute and adorable, and she was so adventurous and imaginative, and so it became a part that I didn't really realize was actually still a part of me. And so loving her, the 7-year-old, allowed me to integrate that into my being and love that part of myself and finding all of these other parts of myself that I can love. And like you said, have like this kingdom of a bunch of different parts of you in every stage of your life that you lived, in every season of life, you created a part. There was some personality or some archetype that you were expressing during that moment. And coming back to that part, reintegrating it into your body and finding love for it. I can see now how I could find my way back to the feeling of self-love because I can conceptualize it in my head, but embodying it is different. I want to be very cognizant of your time, and I appreciate this conversation. I think it's amazing. So I will ask you one final question before I open the floor to you. And this is a question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, what is one transformation that you have seen in a student or a client that has really impacted you and impacted your work, or even just touched your soul?
Hmm. Yeah, I'll speak collectively. There's something about the the transformation that happens in a man that realizes he has a specific gift to share that perhaps hasn't had access to that, and taking the opportunity to reconnect with their purpose and realize that, yeah, that they came here for something meaningful, and that doesn't have to be a big thing that actually even becomes your career per se, but to just recognize that you've done something or you've been through a workshop or a transformation that we've worked through together that's got you to reconnect with that magic, whatever that looks like for somebody, is so profound, because I really think for a man, his job on this incarnation in this life is to find what it is that he came here to do and to serve that mission. And yeah, it might be what you get paid to do, but it may not be. It may be, I've met people that, for example, they are a roof builder or working in something that pays the bills and gets them through the day, but their magic to share, their unique expression of what they want to bring, is that they create a sing song on the beach once a week where people come together and sit around a fire, and that's their magic to bring, and that's their expression of what they want to bring. And so it doesn't have to look like, coaching or speaking on stages or trying to transform the world. It's for men, I think it's just about finding that one thing that makes life meaningful and then following that. And for a lot of men, I think this has been definitely my journey until I took the time to go and seek it. We get stuck in a world where, yeah, we've been handed a frame of what we think makes life meaningful, and often that has to do with career and chasing money and stuff like that. But yeah, I think for a lot of men, there's something outside of that, and so that's definitely a transformation that's been, yeah, powerful for me to witness in the men that I've worked with.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for doing your work. Um, it's so important that men feel that they can have a space to express themselves in whatever way that is without judgment. And um, yeah, it's beautiful what you're doing. Anything else that you want to leave my listeners with?
Yeah, come to a men's circle. I'm just really lit up to get more men in more circles. That's really where it's at. It doesn't have to be with me. There's lots of amazing men's work practitioners and coaches that are coming into the collective right now. Like it's definitely starting to gain traction, and I'm obviously in a bit of an echo chamber because of the way social media operates. So I see quite a lot of it. But yeah, there's lots of amazing spaces where men can come together, and so find somebody that resonates with you, find an opportunity to sit in a circle, be brave enough to go out there, because what you do for yourself is really going to impact your ability to be a better leader, to be a better father, and to be a better husband. So more men in more sacred circles is, yeah, what I'm calling in. So that would be the opportunity that I would invite for women to share with men in their lives. And for men listening to this as well, just, use the opportunity. We've got lots of stuff happening at Fathers, Sons, Brothers. I'm sure you'll put a link into the show notes. And yeah, we've got free content there. We've got the podcast, and yeah, dive in. They just like going to the gym. The hardest part is just showing up at the circle. And I'm sure you found with your space holding as well. By the time you get in there, you just hold the space and the magic unfolds. And so, yeah, there's not much more to do except to show up. And so, yeah, that would be my final thought.
Yeah, amazing. Gareth,
Mhm.
thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate your time and energy and all of the wisdom that you've given me and given my audience. So again, thank you very much. And for all of my listeners, I will see you in the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Come follow us on social media at our handle @WordWitchCC. That's WordWitch, C for copy, C for consulting, and don't forget to hit subscribe to keep the magic flowing. See you in the next episode.